Welcome to Straight Up Sports, the podcast, episode 4. Please like and subscribe and share with all your friends. So, I'm sorry I haven't recorded a video in the last couple weeks here. Again, timing and everything. Today's episode is going to be about the NBA. So, if you're not interested in basketball, go find another thing to watch. So, we're at the All-Star break now in the NBA. Clearly, in the Eastern Conference at least, the Celtics are by far the best team. They have a 6-game lead over the Cavaliers for the top spot in the East. And in the West, we have Minnesota, kind of a surprise team, kind of came out of nowhere. They have a 1.5-game lead over the Thunder, another surprise team for the top spot in the West. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretty much give just a recap of what's gone on during the season and also team expectations and stuff like that. So to start the year, remember, Denver was the defending champs. They beat Miami last year in the NBA Finals. Miami was kind of a shocker, kind of came out of nowhere. Denver, I don't think anyone really picked them to win, but they ended up winning. Nikola Jokic is the best player in the world, and Jamal Murray, when he's on, he's on. They got really good contributions from guys like Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, when they had Bruce Brown, who ended up moving on. Denver clearly was one of the best teams in the NBA, and no question about it. So coming into this season, obviously Denver has a target on their back, but there were some other teams with title expectations. In the East, you're talking about Boston, talking about Philadelphia, Milwaukee, right after they acquired Damian Lillard. Then you look at the West, teams like the Clippers, who ended up acquiring James Harden, teams like the Suns, who ended up acquiring Bradley Beal. These were teams with title expectations. Now, of course, only 2 teams can get there, 1 team from each conference. So a lot of these teams are going to be left disappointed and probably going to have to make moves that they don't want to make. So I'm going to start in the East, since I know a lot of my viewers are East Coast people, if not all of you. So I'll start in the Atlantic Division. So we'll start with Toronto. The Raptors were a team coming into the season. They had some talent on their team, but I think everybody knew their title window had closed. Everybody knew that. So they made some bold moves at the trade deadline. They traded Pascal Siakam to the Indiana Pacers, and they traded OG Anunoby to the New York Knicks. Now, if we're talking about what they got in return, Pascal Siakam, they got some draft capital that'll really help them in the future. The Knicks deal, they ended up getting RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley. Those were the 2 main parts. They also got some draft compensation. Now, RJ Barrett is from Canada. RJ Barrett really wasn't a great fit with what the Knicks had going. It made a ton of sense for him to go home and try to, get back on track. And he was kind of struggling this year. He's more of a ball-dominant player, but he's not a great passer. He's not a great defender. Not a great shooter either, which is kind of sad. His strength is getting to the rim. He is a strong, tough kid who gets to the rim. And then you look at Emmanuel Quickley. He was scheduled to be a free agent after the season. He wanted to be the lead guard. And, of course, when you have Jalen Brunson, you're not the lead guard. So the Knicks ended up moving both of those players in that deal to Toronto. Both players have played better in Toronto. I expect RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley both to be a part of this group, that maybe not the core, but this group moving forward. And I think Masai Ujiri is going to evaluate and see if these 2 guys can be a part of their future. They're a borderline playing team. I don't think they're going to be much better than that. They also acquired Kelly Olynyk at the deadline, which is kind of interesting. He's also another Canadian. I think they wanted like a Canada veteran type guy. And they also acquired Ochai Agbaji from Utah, who was a high draft pick, won at Kansas, and kind of a 3-and-D player, just hasn't really worked out. Maybe he gets another opportunity. And, of course, they have Scotty Barnes, who's, a top 25, 30 player in the NBA, triple-double guy. He's going to be very good for a long time, made the All-Star game this year. Next is Brooklyn, right? Here's a team that, remember, had Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving at one time. Kevin Durant now in Phoenix, of course. Kyrie in Dallas. Also had James Harden at one time. He's now in LA. Brooklyn's in a tough spot because they're a team that doesn't have a franchise player. They're right now, Mikal Bridges is their best player, but let's face it, he's probably the 3rd best player on a team when the team is good. They have Cam Johnson, who they acquired as part of that deal. more of a role player. Nick Claxton's had a really nice year. He's an unrestricted free agent center. To me, they just don't have a franchise player. This is a team that probably has to rebuild quite a bit. I know they have some draft capital and, some stuff like that, but right now they don't have that guy. And they're going to fall out of the race. They were a borderline play, and I think they probably end up falling out. They're not good. Bridges has already been rumored to be traded several times already. They did acquire Dennis Schroeder, which was an upgrade for them because Spencer Dinwiddie, rumors were that he kind of quit on them because he wanted to go to a more competitive situation. He ended up signing with the Lakers. I don't know how much more competitive that is, but he ended up going to the Lakers. So Brooklyn rebuilding team. I don't even know if Jacque Vaughn's the right coach, but I think they kind of gave him benefit of the doubt. We'll see what they decide to do. Next in that division is the 76ers. Now with Philly, it's a team that championship expectations, MVP candidate on your team in Joel Embiid. Tyrese Maxey is an all-star point guard now. And I think the big question for me was Embiid's health and really just the surrounding team. Remember, they moved Harden early in the season after him and Daryl Morey got into it over some money issues. He ends up in L.A. The Sixers go out. They bring in Buddy Hield, who I think is a nice player, good shooter, and he can make up for some scoring while Embiid recovers from his knee injury. Embiid is expected to be out at least a month. I would expect it to be longer than that. I'm sure he'll be back before the playoffs. Will he be 100%? I doubt it. The Sixers, their starting lineup is pretty decent. They also moved Pat Beverly to Milwaukee. That was kind of a weird deal. I understand why they did it, but it kind of just a strange trade. But for Philly, I think, without Embiid, it's going to be really hard to stay afloat. Once you get him back, I think if you get to the second round, that's a good year for them. I don't think they're an Eastern Conference Finals type team. I don't think they're a championship team because I'm not convinced Embiid's 100% healthy. Now, I happen to like the hire they made with Nick Nurse. I think he's a really good coach. He won a championship in Toronto. Granted, it was probably lucky, but he still got it done. But overall, I don't see much out of this team. Next is the New York Knicks. So the Knicks, they made some moves. At the trade deadline, as I mentioned earlier, they acquired OG Anunoby. They also acquired Precious Achiuwa and Malachi Flynn as part of that deal. And then they actually flipped Malachi Flynn along with Quentin Grimes, Evan Fournier, and Ryan Arcidiacono to Detroit for Alec Burks and Bojan Bogdanovic. Now, if you look at the Knicks team right now, they're banged up, right? Randall, dislocated shoulder, going to be reevaluated here soon. Mitchell Robinson is expected to be back on the court after ankle surgery. OG Anunoby had a bone chip removed from his elbow. Isaiah Hartenstein has Achilles tendonitis. So they've had a ton of injuries, the Knicks. And the only way they're going to win is if they're fully healthy. Because if these guys are not healthy, they're not going anywhere. Obviously Jalen Brunson has been a top 5, top 10-ish MVP candidate. No question. He's been, an MVP and an all-star point guard. Probably the best guard the Knicks have had in probably since Clyde Frazier, really. And we'll see what happens. Look, I think a lot of fans want them to go to the Eastern Conference Finals, but they're not going to get there if they're not healthy. It's really simple. All these guys are expected back before season's end. Hartenstein is expected to come back after the All-Star game. I think DiVincenzo was a little bit banged up. He's also expected to play after the All-Star game. Randall's the key, though, for me. If the Knicks want to go far, Julius Randle has to be that second guy every single night. He can't have these games where he goes for 15 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 turnovers. Can't do that. If he plays like he has in the last 2 playoff years, now I know last year he was hurt. The year before it was his first time as the guy. If he has a bad playoffs, the New York Knicks will be trading Julius Randle this summer to try to get a superstar, whether it's Donovan Mitchell or whether it's, somebody else. Julius Randle will not be a part of their team next year if he does not play well in the playoffs. They will just look at him as a great regular season player and a below average playoff guy. It's a huge postseason for Julius Randle. I know he's got the shoulder injury. He may not be fully healthy, but it's still big for him. He's got to play up to his level. If he can do that, I think the Knicks can get to the conference finals, heck, maybe even the NBA finals. But, I think a good season for the Knicks. If you can get to the second round, if you lose to Boston, fine, it is what it is. Milwaukee's going to be tough. Giannis is a tough cover for anybody. Lillard's a great shooter. And let's face it, Jalen Brunson is not a great defensive player. It's not really his game. Their best defensive guard is Miles McBride, and he's likely going to be out of the rotation when everybody's healthy. So we'll see how it goes for them, but honestly, it's the Knicks. Like, if you expect them to win a championship, you're probably rooting for the wrong team. Okay, and then, of course, there's Boston, right? NBA Finals or bust for them. Jason Tatum, really good player, of course, an all-star player. Jaylen Brown, all-star type player. They acquired Porzingis this summer. Obviously a very good stretch five, but has an injury history. Also acquired Jrue Holiday, one of the better defensive guys in the NBA. So for them, they got to get to the NBA Finals. It's one way or the other, they got to get there. There's pressure to win right now. I just have some worries with them. Number one, their lack of depth. I know they picked up Xavier Tillman, but they're not a deep team. Number two is the last 5 minutes of games. They really struggle at the end of games. They just do not come through for whatever reason. And number three is going to be the health of Kristaps Porzingis. He has, obviously, as Knicks fans know, has had a history of injuries from ACL to knee to whatever. And then number four, the biggest one for me is the coach. Joe, is the inconsistency and the inexperience of this coach. And we'll have to see kind of how it goes with them. And I think they will be the clear favorite in the East to go to the NBA Finals. Even though they're not a deep team, they probably have the best five-man starting lineup in the NBA right now. They're going to be tough. They're going to be a tough out. I think the way to beat them is you got to play ugly. You got to force them to do unorthodox things. I think you got to force the ball into Jaylen Brown's hands, get it out of Tatum's hands. Porzingis is a matchup nightmare for a lot of teams because a lot of teams don't have a center that can guard on the perimeter. But overall, I think Boston is clearly the favorite in the East. In the Central Division, so we'll start at the bottom with Detroit. Obviously a team in a major rebuild. They traded Bogdanovich and Burks to the Knicks. They released Killian Hayes from his contract. He was a former top 10 pick. That kid has not played very well in the NBA this year. He's not a great shooter. That's part of the problem. They gave Monty Williams, their head coach, a massive contract, which I thought was one of the biggest overpayments I've ever seen. And I happen to like Troy Weaver as a general manager, but Detroit, I don't see any direction with them. I mean, Cade Cunningham's a great player, but Jaden Ivey hasn't lived up to expectations. Jalen Duren's been great for them, but that's really it. I mean, you're talking about Duren and Cunningham, and they pretty much don't have anything else on their team. They did acquire Quentin Grimes. Maybe he could be a rotational player for them, but he's not going to be a starting player. Overall, this team is just so bad. They're going to be bad for a while. I don't really see this team coming anytime soon into the playoff picture. Number four is Chicago. Look, this is a team that is one of the most delusional organizations in the NBA. It's a team that has to go into a rebuild but doesn't want to admit it. There were rumors that their owner was ready to accept a rebuild, but their GM said no, which kind of tells me that maybe he's a little bit on edge for his job, because he doesn't either trust his scouting staff or he doesn't trust himself. But, at the end of the day, they should have traded DeRozan, should have traded Vucevic, should have traded Zach LaVine before he decided to have surgery. Should have traded Alex Caruso. I mean, you could have gotten a ton for these guys. Now, Zach LaVine, we know the problem, overpaid contract. And let's face it, he's not a winning player. And the only teams who are going to want him are bad teams. And if I'm Zach LaVine, I'd rather get the foot surgery than play for Detroit or Charlotte. That's just me. You look at a team, you look at Nikola Vucevic, stretch five, really good player. But he probably, he didn't want to go. I mean, he made that clear. DeRozan is interesting because he's a guy who I think a lot of people think is great, but he has declined the last couple of years. I think he's basically a better version of RJ Barrett, right? He's a mid-range jump shooter. And if you noticed, every team he's left has done better. Like Toronto won a championship. San Antonio ended up being worse, but they got Wembanyama. So DeRozan's kind of like bad juju, I guess, in a way. Caruso, I don't know why they have such a high price tag on him. He's a nice role player, but I mean, you're not getting a first-round pick for Alex Caruso. Like, that's just not going to happen. I'll tell you who I like on their team is Kobe White. Kobe White's played really well. He was out of North Carolina. He's played really nice this year. Really good scoring guard. Really knows how to put the ball in the basket. And let's face it, Billy Donovan, he had some success at the NBA level. I think if he were to get fired, every college would want to hire him in like 2 seconds. Every NBA team would probably stay away from him. So, yeah, this is a team that kind of just middle of no man's land. Then we have Indiana. So this is a team, I thought they could be in the play-in tournament, going into the year. Halliburton has turned into a superstar point guard, maybe the best in the Eastern Conference. Obviously they traded Buddy Hield away, which is fine. I don't think they need scoring. Their defense is awful. They need some more defenders. Miles Turner's a nice center, but he's nothing special. Aaron Nesmith has played really well for them this year. The forward they acquired in the Celtics trade, that's worked out for Indiana. They also have Benedict Mathurin, who they drafted from Arizona. They also acquired Doug McDermott, who played for them once before. Now he's back. They're going to be a dangerous team because they want to get up and down and score 150 points, and they're going to give up 150 points. So they want to play high-scoring basketball, but the problem is when you get to the playoffs, everything slows down. It's all about the half-court execution, and that's just not who they are. Halliburton will probably get 20 points, 15 assists every night, but he's going to need some more help probably. They acquired Siakam. That's huge. Siakam is a really nice fit with them. But I think the problem for them, like I said, is going to be their just lack of intent to defend. Then I'm going to go with Cleveland. I really like the way the Cavs have played. They've obviously played great. They're second in the Eastern Conference. Donovan Mitchell has been rumored to be traded for a while now. He claims that he's happy where he is until they lose in the playoffs, then he won't be happy. That's kind of how it goes. He's happy now because they're 6 games out of first place in the Eastern Conference at a number 2 seed. It's like, yes, we're playing great. Then they lose in the playoffs, and he's going to go, I don't want to be here anymore. It's just kind of how NBA players are. Darius Garland and Evan Mobley both were banged up. Both are now back and playing. Jarrett Allen's been awesome for them. Strus has been a great pickup. Karis LeVert, we know what he can do. George Niang, we know what he can do. Cleveland's a tough out. They're a team that can score. When they played the Knicks last year in the playoffs, they struggled. The Knicks really locked them down. I think Cleveland's a solid team, though. I don't think you can take them lightly. Donovan Mitchell's an all-star. Probably a top 5 guard in the Eastern Conference right now, no question. We'll see what happens to him in the offseason. I think he probably ends up in LA or New York. He doesn't want to play in these small market teams. He wants to go to a big market. We know there have been rumors recently that the Lakers were going to take a long look at him. The Lakers have 3 available first-round picks. They can trade it. The Knicks weren't really in the mood to do that because of a couple of things. 1, Donovan's not a great defender. 2, him and Brunson are not big, so they don't really have big guards. And DiVincenzo's played really well next to Brunson this year. I don't know how much longer that'll last. DiVincenzo's probably better off the bench long-term. But, we'll see what Cleveland decides to do this offseason. And then, of course, you have Milwaukee, with Giannis and Dame. Now, of course, Milwaukee's been one of the most pulverizing teams this year. Let's remember, they hired Adrian Griffin in the offseason. I thought it was a terrible hire. Didn't like it because you're hiring an inexperienced coach. Didn't like what Boston did, but they were kind of in a tougher spot with Ime Udoka and what he did. So they hire Adrian Griffin. Then they fire Adrian Griffin and they bring in Doc Rivers. And Doc is a guy who has not done well recently in playoff spots. Really struggled. Did TV for a little bit, and he's like, I want to get back in. He probably, who knows what he did to get back in that job, but he's from, he went to Marquette, he's from Chicago, he's kind of a Midwest guy, so it kind of made some sense. But let's face it, Damian Lillard's not a defender. Their role players are nice, like Portis, Connaughton, Brook Lopez is fine, but at the end of the day, they're going to miss Drew Holiday's defense. Damian Lillard wants to score a ton of field goals, and make a bunch of rap records. I'm sure he wants to win a championship. So did Carmelo Anthony. He didn't win. So, to me, Damian Lillard, I've said this before, Damian Lillard is the Carmelo Anthony of point guards. Great scorer, nice player, does some good things off the court, but I don't think he ever wins a title unless he commits more on the defensive end. If he commits more on the defensive end, Milwaukee will absolutely be in the mix because they are going to miss Drew Holiday. And remember, Chris Middleton has been injury prone. He had knee, then he just sprained his ankle before the All-Star break. Doc Rivers came out and said some of his players were already booking trips to go to Cabo, Mexico. That's a disaster. That to me is so bad. I think they're 3-7 under Doc right now. And obviously it takes time to adjust to a new coach, but they are in shambles right now. I don't see Milwaukee really going anywhere. At this rate, if it continues, I think a lot of the blame is going to be on Giannis and Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard, you said you wanted to win a championship and you didn't. And Giannis, you pretty much hired Adrian Griffin, then you pretty much fired Adrian Griffin. And you brought in Doc Rivers because you think, okay, bringing in a championship player, that works, whatever, coach, whatever. And what happens? You're not that good. So to me, it's a personnel issue. Now it's going to be on the players, right? You change the coach. Now it's going to be on the players. And it's going to be, okay, what do we do? Okay, so Giannis says, you know what? I don't want to be here anymore. And then what's going to happen? The Knicks are going to say, okay, here's 6 first-round picks. Here's Randall. Here's Bogdanovich. Let's go. That's what the Knicks are hoping for, okay? But I'm just telling you, Milwaukee right now is in shambles. Okay, Southeast Division. So Washington, right? Supposed to be bad. They were going to be terrible all year. Everybody knew that. They acquired Jordan Poole after him and Draymond got into it, last year. Kuzma's there. He's had a really nice year for Washington. I'm surprised he wasn't traded. There was a report that said they had asked him if he wanted to go to Dallas, and he said no. So it sounds like he's going to stick around for the rebuild in Washington. I think he likes it because he gets to score all the time. If he goes to a championship team, he's like the 4th guy on the team. So I think he just prefers being the best guy on a rebuilding team. I can't blame him. He's going to get a ton of playing time, and who knows, he may get more money that way. They still have Tyus Jones at point guard. Nice player, but probably more of a backup at this point. They did trade Daniel Gafford to Dallas. Gafford is one of the best rebounding centers in the NBA. But Washington's in a rebuild. I think they also fired their coach, Wes Unseld Jr., so Washington is going to be a slow-moving rebuild. I think they just started it too late. Should have done this last year and traded Bradley Beal, but they waited too late, and then they obviously moved him to the Phoenix Suns. Then there's Charlotte. So this is an interesting team. So they were terrible all year, and I don't like LaMelo Ball. I've made that clear. He's not a winning player. He cares about money and scoring. He doesn't care about winning. There was a moment I was actually watching the Knicks-Hornets game a few weeks ago. Steve Clifford, their head coach, got thrown out of a game, and LaMelo Ball was seen laughing on the sideline. Like, you're down 30. You don't laugh at something like that. So that was really bad. They made some. I actually really like what they did at the deadline. They traded P.J. Washington, who's kind of like this up-and-down role player, to Dallas. They got back Grant Williams, who I think is really going to help them. And I think Grant Williams kind of counted his money in Dallas. Didn't care as much because, again, when you get that first big deal, you start counting that check. I think that's kind of what happened there. He also wasn't well liked in the Dallas room because he signed with Tatum's shoes instead of Doncic's shoes. Who cares? He's allowed to do what he wants. Then they acquired Seth Curry, who is from that area, so I think that helped them. Then they traded Gordon Hayward to the Thunder. They got Davis Bertans back, who can shoot. He's overpaid, but he could shoot. They acquired Trey Mann, I think, and some other players. I like what Charlotte did. I actually think they got better. Gordon Hayward is injury-prone, bench player. P.J. Washington is erratic. So I actually like what they did at the deadline, and they've won 3 in a row since the trade deadline. So, I like what they did. I actually like Steve Clifford as a coach. I could see why you'd fire him. I could see why you'd keep him. But I ultimately don't believe they're going to win with LaMelo Ball. I just don't. I think when LaMelo's contract expires, or when he feels like he wants to go be a mega star, he's going to ask for a trade to LA because he's from there. And we'll see if the Lakers decide to go get him and then maybe pair him with Bronny James or something down the road. We'll see. Next is Atlanta. So this team, everybody talked about them at the deadline, right? Okay, they're going to trade DeJounte Murray. They're going to trade DeAndre Hunter. DeJounte Murray ended up going nowhere, and DeAndre Hunter ended up going nowhere. Quinn Snyder comes in as the head coach. He brings on Mike Bray, former head coach of Notre Dame. And look, I think Atlanta's got some decisions to make. I think they gave up a ton for DeJounte Murray. That was a mistake. They want the same value back. Here's a news flash. They're not getting it. They're probably not getting even 2 first-round picks. They might get 1 if they're lucky. Because Anunoby didn't get you a first-round pick, and he's better than DeJounte Murray. So I don't see them, getting the value they want for him. And I think the big question you got to ask yourself is, do you want to move Trae Young? Because I don't think Atlanta's going to win in the next 5 years. I don't see it. Trae Young, if I'm him, and you want to win a championship, right? That's the goal at the end of the day as an NBA player, is you want to win. If you're Trae Young, you definitely want to leave Atlanta and go to a more competitive team. I'm sure the Lakers will have interest. There will be other teams that will have interest in him. He is a superstar of a scorer, but he is not a great defender. He's been better defensively this year, and I know some people I've seen on social media say, well, Trae Young's not getting the respect he deserves. Some of that is because, one, he's not well liked by fans. Fans just don't like him. I don't know if it's because of what happened with him and the Knicks a couple years ago. I'm not really sure, but he's not well liked. People understand that he's just a scorer, and defense will never be his calling card, and he probably won't put in as much effort defensively at times. So I think that's probably part of it. Then there's Orlando. I thought they were a team that would probably be competitive for a play-in tournament, but boy, they've been really good. I mean, you got to give Paolo Banchero credit. Had a hell of a year. Made the All-Star game for the first time. Jamal Wilkes Jr.'s done a really good job there. He's done really, really well. Or sorry, Jamal Mosley is the head coach's name, and he's done a really nice job with Orlando. And Franz Wagner's been good. The only question for me with the Magic is they got to figure out their guards, right? They have Jalen Suggs from Gonzaga, Cole Anthony, who was at North Carolina, Anthony Black from Arkansas. I think they drafted Juwan Howard's kid from Michigan. They also still have Markelle Fultz. So Orlando's going to have to, and they also have Gary Harris. So Orlando's going to have to figure out their guard situation. I think if you could figure out two elite guards there, I like their chances, but I think they'll probably be in the play-in tournament. They'll probably get out of it, but I don't see them going further than the first round. And honestly, that's a really good year for Orlando. Like, if I'm a Magic fan, I'm actually pretty excited with what you have. And then there's Miami. Look, it's a championship finals type hangover. They've had a lot happen to them recently. Jimmy Butler had a death in the family, so he has to take time away. Terry Rozier, who they acquired at the deadline, he got hurt. Spoelstra got a huge contract. Bam Adebayo was named as an injury replacement for Embiid. So Miami's good. They're always going to be dangerous because of the coach, and Jimmy Butler does much better in the playoffs. But I don't know. Like, they don't really have a point guard. Rozier's more of a scoring guard. They didn't get Kyle Lowry. He goes to Philly. They didn't get Damian Lillard. He went to Milwaukee. So I don't know. I'm kind of out on them right now, but I'll tell you this. I wouldn't bet against them in the playoffs because of the coach, because of Jimmy Butler. Like, I just wouldn't bet against them not being, like, completely out of it. I think they're going to be in it, but I think there are just some other teams that are a step ahead, like Boston, New York, Philly, Milwaukee. Those teams are probably a step ahead. Would it surprise me if Miami got to the second round? No. But I wouldn't count on it just because I don't love their group. So that's the East. All right, let's go to the West. So I'll start with Portland. Rebuilding team, as we know. They moved Damian Lillard this offseason. They acquired DeAndre Ayton from Phoenix. And basically their team is now Anthony Simons. I almost said Anthony Henderson. Anthony Simons, who's been a really nice scoring guard for them. Of course, Jeremy Grant, who signed an extension there. And then they also have Scoot Henderson, who they drafted, who, offensively it's going to take him a while. And then DeAndre Ayton, who, they said early on he really struggled. And, I think that guy's ego just got in his way. I think he's got to understand that he's just a complimentary player. He can't be the best player on the team. He's a guy that you got to feed in the post. He's got to make some moves, got to hit the mid-range game. Defensively, he's kind of up and down. That's kind of what centers are in the NBA for the most part. Chauncey, I don't think he's a great coach. I think he probably belongs in a front office role, to be honest. But this is a team that's going to be in a rebuild for a while. They're in the talent acquisition business. I'm surprised they at least didn't put Jeremy Grant on the table. I thought maybe they would try to move him, kind of see what you can get for a veteran like that, because he's a guy who would have been really attractive. I know the money's a lot. He would have been an attractive piece at the deadline, because he's a guy who can get you 20, even 25 on some nights. Then there's Utah. Utah, was an interesting team. I actually thought they could have done more at the deadline. I'm really surprised they kept Colin Sexton. Really surprised they kept Jordan Clarkson. I thought they were going to move both of those guys. I know Sexton isn't the most sexiest guy on the market. He's a scoring guard, never really been a part of winning culture in his career. Clarkson, everybody knows what he is. He's a scoring guard, sixth man. I thought he would have been a nice fit for the Knicks, but the rumor was that Utah wanted a first-round pick for him. No one's trading any first-round pick for Jordan Clarkson. I'm sorry. That's just not going to happen. I love Lauri Markkanen, though. Really good player. Walker Kessler, really good player. I don't know what Danny Ainge is doing. We'll see. I mean, I think he's still living off the Kevin Garnett-Paul Pierce trade that he made many years ago with Brooklyn. But they're a team that has to continue to rebuild. I mean, they're right now, they're pretty close. If I pull up the NBA standings here, right now Utah is 2.5 games out of the play-in tournament. So, they're in that 11 spot. They'll probably be there most of the year anyway. But yeah, they are certainly in a rebuild. Then there's Denver, defending champs. I think they're kind of playing slow right now because they're kind of bored. I think they just want to get to the playoffs, right? Jamal Murray, Jokic, Porter, Gordon. To me, for Denver, I thought they were going to add a Bruce Brown type of player. Maybe not Bruce Brown, but, his type of player. They didn't do that. I know they're kind of tied a little bit. Their hands are tied right now because of the CBA rule that got put in. I believe it was this year or last year, where they can only, acquire certain players due to cap issues. So I understand, Denver's probably going to ride with what they have. Their bench is a little thin when you look at Reggie Jackson's a nice player, but he's nothing exciting. Christian Brown's young. Peyton Watson is young. Of course, they'll get Caldwell Pope back from his injuries. And then you have DeAndre Jordan, who's got to be 38 years old probably by now. And, Denver's going to be right there. At the end of the day, they're going to be right there. They're a really good team. To me, it really just comes down to, do they have enough depth to win it again? Then there's Oklahoma City. I mean, what a story they've been. That coach has done a hell of a job. I mean, he really has. And, he's really done a nice job. I don't really know how to pronounce his last name, so I'm not even going to attempt it. But, they've done a heck of a job. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, top 5 MVP candidate. Chet Holmgren, top 2 Rookie of the Year candidate. Jalen Williams might be the best role player in the NBA. Oklahoma City is no slouch. They're going to be a tough out. I know they're young. They're inexperienced. I'd probably have them as the 4th or 5th best team in the West, but it's a team that's going to be a tough out because they have a go-to guy at the end of the game. They have a big that can roll and shoot, and they've got really good role players. They acquired Gordon Hayward. I don't know how much he's going to help them. I think he helps them more in the locker room than he does on the court. But we'll just have to find out and see how good they are. And then, of course, there's Minnesota. Anthony Edwards is a superstar, no question. He's been unbelievable, worth every amount of that number 1 pick. Rudy Gobert and Towns, there was questions about the fit. That has worked out. Naz Reid's had a really nice year for them, and their coach is going to be the coach of the All-Star game. So that's pretty cool for him. Kind of an unknown guy. I think it's always surprising, when some of these guys come out of nowhere, like Chris Finch did. And he's going to be coaching the All-Star game, and we'll. The All-Star game is very boring. Very boring. It's just a dunk contest, and it's just not really for, older generational fans. It's more for the little kids to watch. All right, next division. Let's go to the Southwest. So we'll start with San Antonio, right? They draft Victor Wembanyama. People think all of a sudden Wembanyama's going to take them to the promised land. Yeah, it didn't happen. San Antonio's 11-44. They are not very good. Popovich is still hanging around as coach, and Wembanyama is going to be a superstar. I mean, what he's done in his rookie year is pretty remarkable. He's a great defender, very good shooter. He just has to put on weight. Biggest thing is he's got to put on weight, but he's got the whole thing. I mean, he's going to take off here in the next couple of years and be a big part of the future of the NBA moving forward. And that's really all I have to say about San Antonio. There's really not much else I need to say. Then there's Memphis. So this is a team, if you remember, last January, they were tied for first place in the Western Conference. And then they had all these things happen. Ja Morant with his, the gun incident. And then he gets suspended for 25 games to start the year. And they made some moves. Like, I like the Marcus Smart addition. I think he fits their culture perfectly. But their team has just had so many injuries. I think at one point they had like 13 guys on the injury report, 8 regulars. Like, it was so bad. They did make a trade. I think they traded David Roddy to the Suns as part of the bigger trade that the Suns made for Royce O'Neal. But I mean, Memphis is just in a rebuild. A lot of their guys are hurt. They're going to, I still think when they're fully healthy, they're a dangerous team, but they're never going to be fully healthy this year. Then there's Houston. They, of course, hired Ime Udoka as their head coach, which was a clear upgrade over what they had. Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, Senga, of course. They have some really good young talent. I think the next step for them is finding veterans that can help. Because obviously they signed Fred VanVleet. They signed Jeff Green. They need some veterans to really help these young kids take a step. I think they've taken a step this year. Their defense is much better than what it was. The next step for them is just finding that superstar. Because right now, Jalen Green, high draft pick, not a superstar. Jabari Smith, high draft pick, not a superstar. I mean, Alperen Sengun is close, but I don't know if he's a superstar. I'm not really sure with him. Van Vliet is not a superstar, so they have some nice players, but they're still in a rebuild. They're 6 games under 500 right now. To me, they'll probably miss the play-in tournament, but I think next year the goal will be to get to the play-in tournament. Then there's Dallas. I like what they did at the deadline, acquiring P.J. Washington. Again, like I said when I did Charlotte, kind of an up-and-down role player, but Dallas needs role players right now. Gafford, I like that pickup as well. And now you have Luka and Kyrie together. Of course, you have Tim Hardaway Jr., Josh Green, Dwight Powell. They've got some really good players. Like, this is a pretty solid team. They need Luka and Kyrie to be 1 and 2 every night, which they will be. And then I think the question is, can Tim Hardaway Jr. be the third guy? Right? Can he become that third scorer every night? And I think Dallas is going to be a dangerous team in the playoffs. We saw that last year with Luka. I think they're a team that can get to at least the second round, the way Luka plays. Right now, I think they're probably in that 4 to 7 area in the West. But Luka's probably going to be the best player on the court every night. So, Dallas is going to be in every game. It's just a matter of they've given up a ton of their future for this. They're all in. Like, this is a team that doesn't have draft picks. They are all in to win it right now, Dallas. Do I think they're going to? No. But they're going to try. And number 1 is New Orleans. They're an interesting team for me. Right? You have Zion Williamson, who was supposed to be a superstar coming out of Duke. Then he has all these weight problems and all these girl problems and just like all this off the court stuff. Then he wanted a trade. Then they didn't trade him. Now he's still here, signed the extension. Like, he's been all over the place. Brandon Ingram, nice player. CJ McCollum, nice player. I just don't know. Like, they're not going anywhere until Zion Williamson becomes a legit superstar, like a 28 and 12 kind of guy. Like, until that happens, they're just going to be a nice, dangerous team that doesn't win. That's what they're going to be. They're going to be tough. Like, they have 3 guys that can really score. I like Herb Jones and Trey Murphy a lot. Alvarado's interesting. Like, they've got some pieces there, but they don't have, like, the Giannis, the Luka, they don't have the Jokic. Like, they don't have that elite of a superstar. That, to me, is the concern with New Orleans. Okay, then we go to the Pacific. Probably the toughest division in the entire sport. I'll start with Golden State. They're an interesting team. As most people know, they're one of the most highly criticized teams because of who they have and how much they've won. And, Steph's a great player. Clay has kind of fallen off. Was pretty good in his last game, but he's fallen off quite a bit. Wiggins has been so up and down this year. Draymond, of course, got suspended for hitting Nurkic, and he's been what he is. He's going to talk a big game and he's going to play a big game. That's what Draymond is. But Jonathan Kuminga to me has been the story for them. He has been really, really good. I think that kid is absolutely a keeper for them going forward. Right now, Golden State is in the play-in tournament. If I go to the NBA standings, they are currently the last team in the play-in game. They are a game and a half out of ninth. They're going to be a tough out. Look, I get it. They're old. They're slower. At the end of the day, it's a team with championship pedigree, right? They have a great player in Steph Curry. Clay can get hot at any time. We know what Draymond does. Wiggins, if he finds his game, I don't know if he will or not. If he does, who knows? Kuminga's playing the way he does. Golden State is going to be a tough out. Okay? They're going to be. Play-in tournament right now, they'd be playing the Lakers. That would be hilarious. It'd probably be the most highly rated play-in tournament game ever. And I would take Golden State to beat the Lakers. I would. I just think they have more talent. They're deeper. The Lakers, they're kind of an older team. I'll get to them next. But, the Lakers, they're just old. And, like I said, if you told me to pick today, who do I trust more, Golden State or LA, I'd probably take Golden State. So that brings me to the Lakers. Of course, LeBron James does his little antics, puts the hourglass emoji, uses the Knicks towel, and of course the media is diving into it. Oh my God, is he going to leave? Is he going to leave? LeBron James is going nowhere. Okay, first of all, he's building a $100 million house in Beverly Hills. He's not going anywhere. That's number one. Number two, Bronny James is available to be drafted next year. Now, do I think Bronny James is ready to be an NBA player? No. Is LeBron going to force it? Yes. Bronny James has not looked good at USC, but he did, of course, have cardiac arrest, so that obviously factors in. Look, the Lakers are slow. They were in on DeJounte Murray, didn't want to give up that kind of value. D'Angelo Russell's played better, but I'm not really a big fan of his, personally. I don't love his game. Anthony Davis is awesome. Great player. This is another tough one because Darvin Ham, to me, is a coach that probably, another inexperienced guy who probably should have started in a rebuilding situation. Even though I know he got to the conference finals last year, I still think he's the type of coach that belongs in a rebuild, just like Boston's coach and just like Adrian Griffin. I always think when you take your first job, you always should start in a rebuilding situation, kind of learn how to coach, and then when you're ready, you take that next step. But as long as you have LeBron James, it's championship expectations, right? You're expected to win every single year. Now, I don't think the Lakers are winning this year. Could the Lakers get out of the play-in tournament? Sure. They definitely could. It's an absolute possibility. I don't think they will, but they certainly can. I mean, you have LeBron and Anthony Davis. D'Angelo Russell can get hot at any time. I just think the problem with them is they've had some injuries. Cam Reddish was hurt. So they've been dealing with that. And I just don't think they're as good. They lost, Lonnie Walker was big for them last year. He ends up in Brooklyn. I just don't see it with them. I don't think LeBron's going anywhere because I think now, after this year, I think for him, it's just going to be about playing with Bronny, and that's going to be the end. And I don't think he's going to be about winning championships. He'll say it publicly, but in my opinion, if he really wanted to win a championship, he would leave LA. Rob Pelinka clearly does not want to jeopardize his future for a 40-year-old. He didn't want to. Do I believe the Lakers look to trade him? Maybe they threw his name out there and see what they could get for him, but I don't think they're ever actually going to move him. Okay, next is the Sacramento Kings. So this is a team that, last year had a great year, lost to Golden State in the playoffs. Fox and Sabonis are awesome. I love Keegan Murray. I love Mike Brown. That was a great hire. I really like Mike Brown. But let's face it, Sacramento is not going to be one of these elite teams in the West. De'Aaron Fox, Halliburton. Halliburton is probably the better point guard, even though Fox is nothing to sneeze about by any means. I never understood why they were in on Siakam because him and Sabonis is kind of a weird fit. Malik Monk's a nice player. Obviously, him and Fox go back to Kentucky together. I love Keegan Murray. one of the most underrated players in the NBA. He's really good. But I think Sacramento has found some stability now. Like, Mike Brown can coach. They've got a point guard. They've got a power forward. Like, I think Sacramento has finally found some stability in their team. Remember, this is an organization that has been so up and down throughout the years, and they've never been good, and they always seem to do the wrong thing. And now you're going to be in the playoffs probably 2 years in a row, so that's at least a good sign for them. I think they end up in the play-in game probably somewhere in that 8, 9, 10 area. Right now they're 8th. I could see them falling behind Golden State and LA. Again, if I go back to the standings, Sacramento is 2 games up on the Lakers, and they're 3.5 up on Golden State. So that's easily that can be made up. So I think Sacramento they're a good team, but I still think they're not really a championship level team. Then let's talk about the Suns. So they, of course, acquire Bradley Beal. They bring in Grayson Allen, who's had an awesome year. Grayson Allen's been maybe the best role player in the NBA. I mean, he's been that good. Of course, Kevin Durant came from Brooklyn. They hired Frank Vogel. I didn't love the hire, didn't hate it. New owner now. Look, Phoenix has to get to the Western Conference Finals, to me. Like, obviously you're going to be competing with the Clippers in Denver. But I'm telling you right now, if they don't get to the Western Conference Finals, I could see them firing James Jones. I don't think they'd fire Vogel after 1 year. I think that's unfair. I think the problem really was you acquired Bradley Beal, takes up a ton of cap room, and you basically signed a bunch of G League players for your roster spots. When you talk about Keita Bates-Diop and Yuta Watanabe and Nasir Little and Jordan Goodwin, and these guys are borderline NBA players. That's what they are. I mean, your team pretty much is the big three of Durant, Booker, and Beal. You have Yusuf Nurkic, who I really like, Eric Gordon, Grayson Allen. That's like it. I love the Royce O'Neal deal, though. I think he's really going to help them, provides another perimeter defender. He's also really tough. Like, if you didn't watch him in Utah or Brooklyn, he is tough as nails. So I think it's a really good pickup for them. I think he's going to help them. He can make occasional shots. He can get you like maybe 8 to 12 points a game. The thing with Phoenix is, you just better hope, one, they stay healthy, because they've had injury problems with those 3 guys, especially Beal. And I just wonder, you don't really have a point guard. I know Booker's played unbelievable, and he's done a more than admirable job at that position, but he's more of a shooting guard. Beal is more of a shooting guard. Durant, obviously, we know what he is. I love Nurkic. I think they're going to be dangerous. But it really just depends if they can stay healthy and how much can they get out of their bench, right? Because you don't really want to run those 3 guys into the ground 48 minutes. You're going to need some help from guys on that bench. Royce O'Neal, Grayson Allen, Eric Gordon. They're going to need some help. They're going to need those guys to come through. And I absolutely believe Phoenix can do damage. When you match them up with a team like Denver, I think it actually could help them because Jokic and Nurkic know each other well. Jamal is obviously a very talented player. Denver has probably more proven role players. But if you told me, do I want Durant, Beal, and Booker, or Jokic, Murray, and Porter, I'd probably take my chances with the Suns. Even though Jokic is probably the best player, I would take Durant over Murray and Booker. I'd probably take my chances with Phoenix there. But I think it probably comes down to whoever has home court. Which, again, if I go back to my conference standings, would be the Denver Nuggets. Actually, they would play each other in round 1. And that's tough because if the Suns lose in round 1, I don't know what you do. I don't know. I don't know what they'll do with coach. I think James Jones would be out because anytime you bring on a new owner, the expectation is you better win and you better win now or I'm going to spend money elsewhere. That's just kind of how it is. We'll see, but I like the Royce O'Neal deal. I do. I think it'll help them. And then the number 1 team, of course, who I think is going to be in the NBA Finals, if they're fully healthy, is the Los Angeles Clippers. Ty Lue, great coach. Great coach. I mean, not just, he's maybe a top 5, he's probably top 5 coach in the NBA. Kawhi Leonard, not being talked about enough for MVP. He is one of the most efficient players in the league. Great defender. Great. Can really score. Paul George, really good. Had his playoff issues, but I think he'll be fine. Harden also had his playoff issues, can be a drama queen at times, but it looks like he's fit in really nicely there. And Westbrook has also fit in really nicely there. They have some different options at center. You got Zubac and you got Plumlee, Tice. So if you play at Denver, you can throw Jokic some different looks there. I like the Clippers. I do. I would pick them right now if everybody's healthy. I'm picking the LA Clippers to win the NBA championship. I think they're that good. Kawhi would win his third title with 3 different teams. Remember, he won in San Antonio and he won in Toronto, and now he'd win in LA. Clippers are going into a new building next year. I mean, what better way to do it than bringing him with a banner? I mean, that would be pretty awesome for them. Paul George, there have been rumors maybe he'll go to Indiana, maybe he'll go to Philly. Remember, he played in Indiana early on in his career. I think he wants to stay in LA if they can make it work with the money. I think he'd love to be there. But yeah, I think if you asked me today who's going to be in the NBA Finals, I would say it's the Clippers and the Celtics, and I would take the Clippers. I think Ty Lue would do coaching circles all day long. Like, not even a question all day long around Joe Mazzulla. Just, he wouldn't even, Joe Mazzulla wouldn't know what to do. So that's my NBA show. So I'll be doing another episode. I'll probably record it either tomorrow or sometime next week. I'll recap the Super Bowl. Obviously, Mahomes did it again. What else is new? And then I'm going to start talking about March Madness a little bit because we are getting to that time of the year when the college basketball tournament gets started. So, and as most of you know, that's the sport I actually watch the most. So it's probably the one I'm most knowledgeable about. So I will do that either tomorrow. Right now it is currently 8:47 on Saturday, February 17th. All-Star Weekend is currently ongoing. The skills competition is ongoing. So I will be recording either, like I said, tomorrow, or maybe I'll do it soon tonight. I'm not sure, but I will be recording another episode at some point, so look out for that. I appreciate you all listening, and hopefully I'll get this video done in the next week. Take care, everybody.